Hello, Culture Matters Podcast. I'm excited for episode today. Before I introduce you to our guest, here's a quote just for this episode. Character is like a tree, and reputation like a shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. Abraham Lincoln, our guest today, coincidentally, Lion Oaks Consulting, two friends of the Culture Matters podcast. Um, if you haven't listened to episode 223, as we head towards into the 700s, they've supported the show. Two people I consider friends and excited to see and to continue to grow with in and around the advisory space and continue to learn from and with. I challenge you to follow them. Oh yeah, Dr. Huff and Dr. Yerkes are here today to talk from the studio. From the studio. Thanks for coming back, guys, and I'm excited to get inside of your minds and reveal some of those that wisdom and experience with our audience. And we're recording this. This will be out in a couple days on a pretty important day. Uh, and I think it should be said that we're doing this at night, like late, for most people's standards, which I think for the audience, it represents the character, hard work, discipline of the people like yourselves that make sure that we're okay, because at the end of the day, we'll all end up in the healthcare system one way or another, with all seriousness. So thanks for putting in the hard work over the years to take care of our parents and our grandparents and our loved ones. And now this starts sounding like a eulogy. Thanks for coming back to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us back, Jay.
Yeah, is hard. This might be a little bit like, how hard is it really? What do you learn when you put yourself in the environment of the education and process of becoming a healthcare professional? Like from a percentage standpoint, how much harder from a hard work you think that is than most professions? I mean, without sounding like maybe I set you up to sound arrogant or egotistical, I'm asking, is it as hard as it appears? With the lack of sleep and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I mean, it's demanding for sure. It requires a lot of grit, I think, is one of the biggest thing, and perseverance. And definitely, like you mentioned, especially residency is probably the hardest part. Medical school is challenging in its own way. I think one of the interesting things about medical school that I learned, and I think you can learn this when you put yourself, a lot of people that are in special operations talk about a similar type of situation, is you don't realize how much you're capable of until you're pushed to beyond what you even imagined you could do. So academically, medical school is very similar like that. We take, you take something like a regular college class and cram it into a month, along with several other graduate level classes at the same time. And you would never even imagine trying to do that, but you do it. And so I think it's challenging from that standpoint, but it's also rewarding in the fact that just, on a personal level, that you get to see what you're capable of. And then in residency, you kind of take that to more of a little bit of a clinical scenario, and you do push yourself physically and emotionally and cognitively in pretty much every way. So yeah, I mean, I think it's far more challenging than I ever even imagined it could be. It's hard to even comprehend how challenging it's going to be when you get into it. But the cool thing is we're capable of more than what we think we are. So that's interesting to me. Anyways, that's what I've kind of taken from it, is it challenging standpoint.
Yeah, John, what kept you going early on?
I think you just get in that, you have to get in that mindset that this is what you want to do. This is what it takes to get there. And for me personally, I was very fortunate to have, and I'm sure a lot of people are, a really good class. We had a good support system. We actually helped each other out a lot. We shared notes. We studied together. So I think when you're in the trenches with other people, it makes it a lot more doable. I think if I were doing that by myself without good friends and support, it would have been really, really hard. So I think just keeping your eye on your objective and having the support to get there for me was the thing, you know.
What do you think you guys learned in hindsight about around culture from that? And the reason I ask that is it seems like it's a very different, it's got to build a different type of person to take a different, it's, like I've had people that have served the country in the military on the show, and like there's a clear distinction between citizens. What do they call them? What do we call the non, it's like someone that hasn't served. They're just
Civilian.
Civilian.
civilian. Yeah, I said citizen. Civilian. Is it like what? So, is there something similar as it relates to those in the medical profession? You know,
I don't know
like
if we
like
think of
for
it.
example, I'd be considered the uncaring or something. Yeah.
No, I don't think we think of it quite that way, John. Do you? I mean,
No, I
I've
don't think so.
never, well, I have a kind of a unique perspective of being in the military, but also, being in the medical field. Of course, I mean, we don't really, military folks don't think of it. It's not something that's on the top of your mind all the time unless you're involved in interacting in that way, right? Military and civilian, or unless it comes up. But it's definitely not something that is really, I don't kind of see myself identifying in that way, or kind of seeing a differentiator in that way, kind of similar to like a military civilian type of situation, like medical, non-medical.
Hmm. But what about yeah, in hindsight, lessons in culture when you were going through those times to study and work together? Because I heard, think of accountability,
Hmm.
how much responsibility a younger person would need to actually get through those longer hours and do that type of or pursue that type of endeavor. Because when I think of people in college, all right, I want you, or most, it's like how focused is the general person in school, right? It's what can oftentimes considered as a rite of passage, not necessarily like a means to an end. I'm going to be a medical professional or do residency next. I'm curious what you may have drawn from yeah, culture or leadership from that time in your life.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and I think everyone probably has a different experience. Um, for me, I guess looking back over the course of 2 years in the classroom, 2 years in the hospital and residency, over 7 years, you have everyone's going to have their personal ups and downs. They're going to have their professional and academic ups and downs, and for me personally, being in with a good group of people was very impactful in terms of just supporting each other. Learning how to be there for people. We had deaths in families, and we had marriages, and we had divorces in your classes, and so really just learning to keep yourself focused on the objective. Getting through school, taking care of patients, while learning to manage the personal issues taught me a lot. And I would imagine some people have a different experience, but for me, in terms of your question to culture, um, just getting through things together, and that carries on to healthcare. For us as hospital medicine docs, or whoever in healthcare, you're working together as a team. It's not necessarily about who gets the credit; it's about taking care of patients. So learning to navigate the challenges outside of the objective and still get done what you need to get done, I think speaks to the culture,
Hmm.
you know?
David?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what I learned about culture or leadership from my training, whether it be medical school or residency. And if I'm being honest, I don't know that I learned a lot while I was there as far as leadership or culture. I think I can reflect on that time, but I was so young and so focused on the task at hand. I don't know that I was even aware I mean, I was aware, you're aware of what's going on around you, but I wasn't in that mindset of observing my surroundings in a in a way that I was thinking about culture or even leadership. Maybe as far as if I was thinking about leadership, I was probably just thinking about what my leaders were like and what I didn't like about maybe something they were doing or not doing. And but I didn't see myself as a leader at that time, and I was really not probably thinking about those kind of things then. Now, however, reflecting, I can reflect now as a leader and as somebody that's interested in culture and those kind of things. It's a lot easier to now reflect about what some of the things are that I can recognize from that time. So I would say, yeah, if I'm being honest, I probably wasn't even thinking about culture or anything like that when I was going through the experience. I was so intensely focused on the task at hand.
Hmm. Yeah, you guys have a show that you do together, correct?
We we have not started our own show yet, but we are launching one, yes.
What's that called?
So it's called the Medicine
You.
Cabinet with a little play on words there, you know. So we plan on having guests on that have to do with, hospital leadership, hospital culture, and medicine in general, and the culture of medicine and that kind of thing. Um, so obviously we're interested in that. That's part of our consulting firm. It's a heavily influenced by that. So yeah.
Yeah, why is that topic interesting to you guys to interview people around this medicine cabinet concept? And and I ask that because what's of significance that the audience should pay attention to as it relates to that topic?
Yeah, I think just exploring some of the we should always be looking at what we're doing, what people have done successfully. I like to talk to people about what they've done and how they've been successful. For me, I spent a lot of my career in one place, in one hospital, and it it's good to and then I've done some traveling and worked in other hospitals, and it's really interesting to see what other people are doing and how they're being successful and maybe how they do things differently. So that's one thing. And then just gathering other people's wisdom that have done things that maybe you haven't done or are looking to do. So that's really the big idea as far as I'm concerned. John, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. There are so many similar challenges that people in healthcare face, no matter where you are. And so, one thing I learned from hospital medicine is there's so many different ways to tackle similar problems. And I've always enjoyed and appreciated getting insight from people in other places. Um, I've said many times the best and worst thing about hospital medicine is there's no one way to do it. That's good in the way that it gives you some freedom and flexibility, but it can be challenging because there's not necessarily a standard way to do not the medical part, but in terms of structure and function of a group. So yeah, I think the same applies to healthcare in general, just learning what other people do. How do you tackle this? How did you get through COVID? How do you navigate growth? How do it could be any number of topics.
Hmm. What's the smallest to designate if it's a hospital? What's the smallest size that's still within a designation of a hospital? Like if I have 2,000 square foot and a couple beds, could I call that a hospital? Or would that be non-compliant or something?
Typically, the smallest hospitals are typically our critical access hospitals, which are usually 25 beds. And there's a lot of variations on what services they're able to provide based on the location and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, the smallest hospitals you're going to see are generally around 25 beds, and they may not even use all 25 of those beds as acute inpatient. They may only have a handful of patients in a daily basis, and there's something called a swing bed where it's like a short-term rehab for somebody that's trying to get their strength back after a hospital stay. So there's a portion of those beds may be swing beds or maybe utilized as swing beds, but generally speaking, about 25 beds is the smallest you'll see.
is there a scenario where, so there's 25 beds, there's people suffering from also, my speculation would be different ailments. Is there a scenario where we wouldn't want to put these types of, or these people suffering from this type of thing near those suffering from another type of thing because of how that could influence people's like I'm imagining I have my leg got broken. Am I going to be sitting in a bed next to somebody that has like leukemia, or would that be frowned upon, or like
I don't think we try to. So there's infectious, really infectious certain conditions that would have to be isolated, in their own room, so you prevent spread, obviously. And then we have different regions of the hospital or different floors that are kind of designated for special tasks or purposes, maybe, cardiac monitoring, or maybe neurologic conditions, maybe a surgical floor, maybe an orthopedics floor. So there are, in a general sense,
yeah,
there
what are
are
all the
areas,
floors or the sections? Is it usually the
sections,
same, like a
sections.
blueprint?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like levels. It could be, a section of a hospital that's a floor. And so, but it's not hard, and there's not really a hard and fast rule, unless it's something,
Hmm.
say, like, we can't do this certain drip on this floor because that has to go to a different.
Like a human body has a heart and a stomach, and you could probably explain this better than me, but there's different parts of our body. A hospital, I'm just trying to visualize, like metaphorically, has different parts of, if it's if the building is a body, a human body, there's different parts of this hospital
With different
that
functions.
serve different functions based on the general ailments that human beings are confronted with. So like, and just help me out with, just make sure I follow correctly. Like adjacent from the cardiovascular person, you know, it might make sense to have an organ that was complementary to, or a department that was complementary to that cardiovascular. Or you wouldn't want to have the, I was about to make a silly joke. I'd rather home it, but like, is
It's
that
not
make
hard and
sense?
fast. It's not as cut and
Okay.
dry as you may imagine, but there are general things, uh, that we try to kind of cluster together, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, like orthopedics is a common one.
What
Many
does that mean,
hospitals.
orthopedic?
So, so bone and joint, so knee replacements, hip fractures, just because the nursing may be a little specialized for that. You know, stroke patients may be in the same region of the hospital. And then of course things like
What
OBGYN
does
would
stroke fall under? Heart? Or no, that's
it'd be more
brain.
neurological. Yeah. And we go see each hospital, and probably the larger the hospital, the more um specialized those units may be.
Am I
But
a
it really
bad
is.
person for just like seeing dollar signs? I'm just now I'm like asking, I'm just thinking like, stroke. Oh, that's another 80,000. Knee, 75. It's just kind of like
It doesn't really work.
a
It doesn't
tape.
really work that way. The way reimbursement, hospital reimbursement
I
works
know
is,
nothing. So,
yeah, it's simple and complicated at the same time, but it's not what most people in the general public, perceive. And I'm not a hospital billing
maybe
or
that's a good
yeah.
thing to bring into their awareness, right? Like let's say if I don't trust the hospital because I'm really sick, but I don't trust the institution because I don't know enough about it.
Mhm.
I might not bring my kid. Like, have you seen scenarios like that in your career where somebody, because they don't know enough, maybe they don't go and get checked out,
Yeah, I think you
because they
just have to.
don't.
Yeah, I think you just have to. If there are those perceptions with a hospital, I think that hospital just needs to make the efforts to to change those opinions one patient at a time. And that has to do with which we do with Lion Oaks, which is patient experience. We want to make sure that patients feel heard and they feel valued and they feel cared for to the point that if they do need to come back or their relative needs to come back, they had a good enough experience to basically to recommend that place. They took good care of me this time. If I need to go back, that's where I want to go. And that, again, that's one of the things that we try to focus on is ensuring that people feel that way.
I want to make sure I understand, I visualize. Cardiac would be heart.
Mm-hmm.
And you said neurological, orthopedic. Are there any other standout sections in one of these institutions?
I mean, there's the obvious ones like John said, OB, pediatrics, that kind of thing. OB would be obstetrics, which is, delivering babies. Pediatrics obviously is children. So those are some obviously emergency department, those kind of things. Then
Wow.
there's the administrative areas.
The administrative, is there a natural tension between administrative, or can there be, and the I think the reason so I'm thinking of, like, in colleges, we have all the professors that are passionate about, the philosophy professors passionate about the philosophers and the students wanting to learn, the art history teacher passionate about art history. And then there may, be there, then there's the administrators that have their own agendas that isn't necessarily about students learning, but it could be some other, initiative that the college is attempting to live up to. Is that similar? Can that similar tension manifest itself in hospitals?
I think the important thing is for administrators and physicians and medical staff to realize that you're trying to accomplish the same thing, which is to take care of the patients. And really ideally you're working together um, to provide care and, to make sure you have the resources to provide care and the space in the facilities to provide care. So yeah, there should be no tension because you're both working toward the same goal.
How do we start? Yeah. All right. So what would be your advice on how to work towards that same goal? How to
You just
get the choir singing, I guess, or the orchestra playing the songs and the right notes.
I think communication is almost always going to be the answer for how people work together. Open communication, honest communication. I don't think it needs to be complicated. Um, Everyone within an organization has their roles and their responsibilities, and they need to complement each other. So I think just being transparent and open in your communication is really what it takes.
Yeah, and John, to add on to that, so John mentioned communication, but it's hard to communicate if you never actually interact with each other. So I think being involved in similar endeavors, whether that be, doctors participating in committees and being involved, doctors, physicians, especially being involved in the actual functions of the hospital and not just a technician. So as a physician, we are required, there almost all committees in a hospital, and there's multiple, require a physician because of that medical expertise. Obviously, you want a medical expert on your hospital committees. But it is an extra task. It is time consuming. And so, but I think it pays dividends. And John and I have done this since day one to be involved. And
Hmm.
I think when you're able to interact with the non-clinical folks, administrators and folks like that, it benefits both parties. I think they get to see you, they get to hear your opinion, they get to hear your input and your viewpoint, which is important for them as a leader. They Otherwise they're leading blind. So it's important for us to give our to give our input and our insight for our own selfish benefit. Obviously, when I say selfish, I mean, I need to be able to work efficiently and effectively, and that's my main goal as a doc. I want to be able to go in, I want to be able to do my job and do a good job efficiently and effectively. And the things that get in the way of me doing that are not good for anybody. They're not good for the patient, they're not good for the system or anything. But if we're not communicating, we're not working together, then that's not good for anybody either. So, but I think interacting and us seeing, even the administration's point of view, it helps me understand as a physician where they're coming from and vice versa. And so I think that becomes a more effective situation than us siloing ourselves and saying, "Oh, I'm a doctor, I don't want to get involved in that." And even the administrators, being involved and being visible to the clinicians as well is important. So I think seeing each other, interacting with each other in a meaningful way is one of the ways that you achieve that.
Well, what percentage of the employees in a hospital are like administrative to tech use it technician the right terminology to use as far as like a doctor or
Clinician,
nurse or
Clinician.
clinical.
clinician? Yeah, clinician. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, what is it a percentage like 80-20 rule kind of thing or
Oh, I don't know that I could really answer that.
Yeah,
And
I
it
don't.
probably
do
varies from
you
place to place.
like yeah, I'd be curious about that because like how for example, what's the average size hospital ballpark?
Wow, there's so much variation. I don't know if you would a mean, size.
Does that
I
depend
think
on the city
probably
size?
you talking beds, John. I
Is
don't
that
know.
how you would look at
Oh, I
that?
mean, yeah, we
Yeah,
typically talk about it in terms of beds. Yeah, it could be anywhere from 25 to, probably a thousand, 900, 1,000. Yeah,
Like
I
those
don't know the biggest hospital, but
big hospitals, the big ones that just like seem overwhelmingly intense. How many beds are usually in those?
they're probably 800 beds or so. Yeah, but that
Huh.
is, to be honest, that's just a guess. I'm not gonna. Somebody's gonna probably get on here and say I don't know what I'm talking about,
Well,
but
this isn't
yeah,
Oprah. I mean, it's just the culture
I'd
matters. Yes.
I'd say probably about 800 900 beds would be one of the larger system hospital, like a really big academic type center with, tertiary center with all kinds of services.
Hmm. And how, staffing wise, like how many people go to a hospital work every day that size? Ballpark, you think? If you
uh,
had to guess.
So in a
Thousands,
lot of
hundreds?
communities, the hospital, especially in smaller communities, hospitals are the largest employer.
Really?
Yes.
So it's not just impacting people's lives that might lose them or their quality of life.
Mhm.
It's also employing
Yes.
definitely. Yeah.
a
Yeah. So
tremendous amount of the community. A
when a
hospital is
hospital
like the
shuts,
heart of a community in a lot of ways,
yes.
or not, like it's like the hospital is reacting to our ailments. Hopefully the church is preventing, I don't, like there's certain institutions that make a community
Hmm.
successful. I would think a hospital would be one of them if I was guessing, church, hospital, um, what would be another? What would be another? I guess that changes with time,
Hmm.
right? Because that the institutions that are important, well, school, obviously.
School. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But so it's a lot of people generally work at a hospital, and it's not just doctors and nurses. What are the other types of like professions?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's maintenance. There's cleaning, the folks that help with the cleaning staff, which is a huge job. Very, very important. Obviously, every single time a patient moves into a bed or out of a bed or leaves a bed for a new patient, that room has to be totally cleaned. The cleaning, I think, is one of the most absolutely most important and underappreciated jobs in a hospital. There's the meal services. Every patient in a hospital has to get fed every day, multiple times a day,
Wow.
and they have to open the so there's a lot of things that go on. And of course, I said maintenance, but if you think about a large hospital, any hospital system, there's most of these hospitals are old buildings. There's a lot that can happen. There's security. And of course, there's a lot of what we say administration, but there's a lot of managerial positions too that have to help manage each department and things like that. There's these are clinical folks, but they're not doctors or nurses, but you have physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, respiratory therapy, which is massive. So there's social services, which we couldn't do our jobs without any of these folks. So all of these are critically important. And I feel like I've left people out. I'm sure I've left people out, but
Wow.
yeah, there's a lot of people that are on a daily basis are making a difference for patients
Wow.
and also our community members.
Do people that are in management of hospitals generally come from healthcare or outside of that? Like, for example, if I become a doctor, is a pathway inevitably to become into executive management, or is that a rarer thing and it's just some different, pathway to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people either start in clinical medicine and work their way to administrative positions, but a lot of people start out in healthcare administration. They get masters in healthcare administration or MBAs, and they may start in lower level positions and work their way up. So there are a lot of different routes to get there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to gauge like the heartbeat of the, if
Mm.
if the helpers of the consumer's like us, right? We get sick or what have you, and we go to the hospital. The people healing us, they're bought in, maybe that started in college and high school, studying about the body and caring and thinking about, hey, in 20 years, I'm going to help people that are sick versus like, you know, Mark was a stockbroker and he saw an ad to be this vice president of a hospital. Oh, make not, oh, I could, I'm selling. I don't know what happens. Just right now, today, I'm learning so much about how a hospital works. I never thought about these things in my life.
Yeah.
Just
So
a few
I would,
questions like, oh, there's a heart area and wow, that's
yeah,
already kind of exciting to me. Like, oh, brains and hearts and babies. And it's, oh, you don't even think about this stuff if
yeah,
you're not around it. You don't think
right.
like,
Sure.
oh, that's really important stuff is happening over there.
I would say
But yeah, that's
most leaders in a hospital are experienced in that area of whatever their department is. Like the therapy manager is probably a respiratory therapist, and so on and so forth. And so I would say the vast majority of leaders have a background in healthcare, and a lot of them are nurses. Nurses take up and are fill a lot of those administrative positions
hmm.
of 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 um of leadership in the hospital, because there's a huge need for that. And as our the burden of bureaucracy grows from the government, the need to keep up with all those rules and regulations grows as well. So I would say nurses are very common, but in a department, in a specific department, a lot of times those are headed by somebody in that specific area. But at the top level, the C-suite, if you will, they may not necessarily have, and especially as physicians, we have our own kind of leadership in the medicine department, but very rarely, or not in the medicine department, in our medical staff, but the C-suite may not have that kind of experience. The chief nursing officer is a nurse, obviously, but the chief operating officer, the chief financial officer, the chief executive officer often do not necessarily have a specific background in healthcare, but a lot of them have spent most of their careers, I would say, in that setting. As, say, if you're a CFO, you've probably been involved in the healthcare setting, maybe not as a caregiver specifically, but you're familiar with healthcare finances, right? A CEO may have done an administrative or a hospital administration or healthcare administration degree, went into a training program after that degree, and has spent their entire career in healthcare, not as a caregiver again, but in that field.
Does that create, at some level, potentially a disconnect?
Having the highest level leaders not have been caregivers
Like I've read
specifically,
a ton about sex.
clinicians.
I've just never had it.
I mean, I can, yeah. If you're not aware of that as a leader, I think most hospital leaders are they're aware of that. But so, Jay, you and I have talked, extensively about leadership and that kind of thing, and what I believe is good leadership. But so you do have to certainly develop some leadership skills and some awareness as a leader
Like, what are the
to
values of being a heal? I keep using the word healer.
clinician.
Yeah, well, before we had, I mean, this is just a thought experiment, but before we had the knowledge we have about the human body, maybe at one point, what did we have? Shamans and people healing us, or looking over us, and it was like there's a certain type of person that's doing whatever they were doing to make us humans, what, 10,000 years ago, whatever,
So
healed.
yeah.
Like, what's the philosophy of because I keep saying healer, you know, it may have been more of woo woo thousands of years ago. Today, it's like, oh, I know all this stuff about the body and here it is. Here's my energy. Here's the solution. What's the philosophy of the clinician? Are there values that, even if they're unspoken, of a clinician? Like, you know, two clinicians walk into a bar, certain things aren't going to happen. I don't have anywhere I'm going with this. Are there values that you think, even just among your colleagues over the years, that would be like, there's a difference between a clinician and a non-clinician, how they think, or
Hmm.
how they view the human condition. Like, I just a thought out loud. If I dedicated my life to healing people, I'm not necessarily making money isn't the highest, most important thing to me.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all, I mean, we even take an oath, to
Oh yeah.
basically care for people. And, as a clinician, that patient's well-being is your, that's your responsibility. That's your philosophy is doing what you need to do to take the best care of a patient. And I think we all, um, you try to care for a patient like it's your own family. You want to treat a patient the same way you would want yourself or your family treated, right? And um, you have to be a little selfless sometimes. You have to be willing to sacrifice um, some of your own time and energy to do what's right for a patient, because it's, I think, such a sacred trust that someone's coming to you, trusting you to give them everything you can to get them better. So I think that's the philosophy. Is, I think it's it sounds hokey, but that's really an honor to be able to do that for people. So you have to take that seriously. Patient care, patient well-being, that's the philosophy, is doing what you have to do to take the best care of someone.
And I think most clinicians, I think clinician is the word you're looking for, Jay. I think most clinicians, we really would prefer to not deal with business stuff most of the time. I mean, there are doctors that like that stuff. I'm one of them. But for the most part, generally speaking, as you were asking, generally, most most clinicians would prefer to just go in and do the clinical stuff and be done, and only focus on that, right? And not focus on business or any of that stuff, which is, it can create and should create a nice symbiotic relationship between us, the clinicians, and the administrators who that is what their job is, to focus on the business aspect of things and the leadership and everything that that entails. So ideally, we handle our job and we do our job well, and they focus on what their job is, and we work together to make sure that, the leaders give us the tools to do our job to the best of our abilities. And that's, kind of what you would hope for. Again, like I said earlier, though, we do need some involvement because they need to understand what it is we do and how we do it and what we need to make our job successful and that kind of thing. But for the most part, we want to go in there, we want to interact with our patients, we want to take care of them. And that's what we want to really focus our mental energy on.
Like if I bought a hospital tomorrow and my aim was to make a profit, could that go against the patient?
I think it could very easily, yes, be a conflict of interest. It doesn't have to.
Like they're not,
There
are they
are for-profit
nonprofit?
hospitals.
They are not, well, but is a hospital generally nonprofit or a private? I don't know that either.
I think most hospitals, from my understanding, most hospitals are nonprofit organizations. So, which makes sense, but there are for-profit hospitals that take good care of people. And, but again, that's really kind of like a tax structure as far as I'm concerned. Um, and so you can still do ethical things and be a for-profit company, whether that's in healthcare or whatever. Every hospital I've ever worked at has been a nonprofit organization, but that I know of. Um, but it's not required to be that.
And it just because they're a nonprofit doesn't mean they're um cured of potential bureaucracy or things that could go against the patient care. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
What are some of the signs that a hospital is becoming, uh, maybe I shouldn't use cancerous was going to be my metaphor or whatever, but that seems like not a good, almost like a pun, like regressive or going against its purpose. A hospital. Yeah, what are some of the signs that you'd say someone listening that is, could identify with like, oh, maybe we're not we're doing the wrong things, or there could be bad ramifications in the future. Some signs that things are going downhill of a hospital.
I mean, I think it would be the same for probably any organization, healthcare or not. I think if you have good people leaving, that's a sign. If you have the good people becoming quiet,
Mm.
I think that's applicable to any company, probably though. I don't think that's unique to healthcare.
Yeah, I think that's actually that's one of the early signs which a lot of people don't pick up on or don't care about, honestly. If you're and ironically, if you're an organization that's struggling with,
Hmm.
maintaining the right focus, if you will, then you may miss that sign.
What do you think the examples of like what could an effective core focus be of a hospital? Like our purpose is to
So the obvious answer is to take the best care of our patients that we possibly can.
our purpose is to take care of our patients as we possibly can.
I'm
What would we have to believe to
I'm not great at writing purpose statements or vision statements.
what
Yeah.
would we have to believe in order to increase the likelihood of that purpose? If our purpose is to take care of our patient, wait, I can't remember my
Best
handwriting.
care, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, is to take the best care of our patients as we possibly can. If there's like three words that come to mind of what, that could signify what we'd have to believe, what would those words be? To believe in order to even conceptualize that purpose. Based on your guys' experience being around healers and
First of all, the word healer is growing on me. I kind of like it now. Uh,
I
um,
mean, probably too much Warcraft back in the day.
it makes me feel pretty cool. Um, I don't know. I don't know that I'll give you three words. And again, I don't think this is unique to hospitals, but I think taking care of patients, but also taking care of the people who take care of the patients. I think that would be the same in a company. You take care of your customers and you take care of the people that are taking care of your customers. And to me, that's kind of an organizational culture. So yeah, I don't know about that I could give three words, but everyone in a hospital needs to be, and I think generally speaking, they are aligned in providing the best care. Um, you know, our job is to take care of the patients. The administrative executive's job at a hospital is going to be to make sure the place runs and people have the resources they need and the services that patients need. So it's kind of like you said about the human body in a hospital. I mean, there's just different components to any healthcare organization that should all be working, and I think for the most part do work together. We each have our function, but when all of those parts are functioning correctly, you're working together toward the same thing.
Yeah, I'm just like envisioning, so just one customer at a time, right? Like, so Mike is born in section A on this date. Like, what's the customer journey of Mike? Mike is born, today, December 5th, 11/5/24 in the what's that section called? The what is that?
Obstetrics.
What? That's like
Obstetrics.
maybe simplifying the language would help us align the answer. Obstetrics.
Yes. Just say OB.
But think about it, like OB, right? If we what's it called? Geriatric is the end? Is that the end?
That would be elderly people.
Elderly, yes.
Is there a section for that too?
That's the whole hospital pretty
Like
much.
to go peacefully, like you know what I'm saying?
So well, geriatrics is just elderly. But
Geriatrics.
yes,
People
that's
go
just the
there if they're like 100 years old and
I'm not
they're
I feel like
sick.
I should know this, but what is the age? Is it
Oh, well, I'm getting closer to that age, so let's not talk
Yeah.
about it.
Well,
Um,
like, wait, slow down for a second, because like this is all right. So we've all played Monopoly.
yeah,
Like I'm trying to make this for the late. Like, okay, so Mark, if you're watch this on YouTube for the listeners, we're on YouTube now. But like, here's the obstetrics. Mark, Mike is born today. What time is he born? It's 11/5/24. It's 9:05 p.m. Eastern. So Mike is born here.
mm-hmm.
You know, Mike lives to 100. So on 11/5/21/24 at 9:05 p.m., you know, Mike is dead in elderly care. I mean, that's better than going down on the Titanic potentially, or that 46 in 2070.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere between obstetrics and the elderly section, there's all this other stuff that could happen. Like, I'm the customer journey. Mike, okay, I had chicken pox, for example. I don't know how old I was. I had to be like 6 or something. I don't know how. I vaguely remember running around like the house, like my aunt, uncle, and like not having clothes on. I just like remember having. That's where you have the red dots all over you. So
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, that happened to Mike on 12. 1, 20, 30. So, he went to one section of the hospital. And then when Mike was 20, 10, 1, 2, 4, 2044, he breaks his knee. Where does he go? Where
Well,
would
probably start in the emergency department and then probably
the
a referral
emergency?
to outpatient orthopedics, depending on how bad the fracture
See,
is, possibly admission to the hospital.
like if Mike never moves from the community, he goes
Mhm.
to church every Sunday. There's the hospital. Like throughout his life, he's been to this hospital. Like eventually, he ends up in that each. There's different sections based on the things we go through in our life. Like Mike didn't exercise. He didn't hire help. A concierge doctor didn't get it together and has a heart attack at 47, but survives because of your cardio. Is that the cardiovascular area?
Mhm.
So he knows the doctor's there. He's at 62, he gets a stroke. He ends up in the brain area, and then like at 88, Elon Musk puts Neuralink in him, and he's like there's a customer journey.
Hmm.
I was going somewhere with this, I swear, but I'm trying to like conceptualize the journey that we go, that a human being can go on. Or is it like most people don't go to the hospital more than like once every 10 years?
No, they don't. Most of the time, most people do not.
Well, that sounds like a good thing.
Yes,
Mhm.
it
Okay, so
is.
I guess, but at the same time, if people don't go that much, it's not like you know me.
Well,
Like if you knew me, you'd be like, oh, Jay, let's help this guy really quick. You really have to care about human beings as generally, because they're all strangers. Do you really give a shit about, you know? So yeah, not everybody does. You don't want a bunch of narcissists running that building. I'm taking this narcissist course on Peterson Academy.
yeah.
Machiavellian, narcissistic, psychopathic people. You don't want them running the hospital. They don't give a shit about say I keep cursing. They don't care about people.
I think medicine and nursing and that healthcare in general kind of attracts people that are generally altruistic
Like if I owned a
in a
hospital, I want
sense.
a policy, no a-holes,
Yeah.
except the neurosurgeon guys. That's the
Well, you do have, I mean,
Doctor, what's
there's
that
an
movie?
interest.
Doctor Strange? Yeah.
Yeah, Doctor Strange. There's an interesting phenomena because you have people that are you mentioned neurosurgeons, and I've met some incredibly nice neurosurgeons. Um, but it does take a certain degree of expertise and intelligence to get to that level in a career to become a neurosurgeon. And I'm talking incredible uh academic prowess, right? So it is possible to become very scientific brained, if you will, and not as people brained. That's real high intelligence speak right there. But you get what I'm saying, right? And so
Sure.
you can really spend a
Yeah, you're
lot of
just a bunch of
time.
neurons.
You can really spend a lot of time and kind of get used to and comfortable with speaking and thinking in this scientific brain, if you will, in this scientific even identity. Um, and it doesn't always translate into an interpersonal interaction as well as a patient might hope.
Well, how do I not lose my compassion at some level seeing people die every day?
I don't think you have to
Is
lose
that
your
way on me?
compassion. I don't think you have to lose your compassion, but I don't
Or
think you can.
something? I don't know. Like,
Yeah, I don't think that you can give every ounce of your heart and soul to that either because I mean, you have to guard yourself to some degree, and that's a balance.
Like, you know how they have post-traumatic stress disorder for people that fight wars?
Hmm.
Is there something like that for clinicians that can manifest if the clinician is not careful?
Yeah, I think we see that. I think we don't see it as PTSD. I think we see it more as like burnout sometimes, and depression, maybe masked, well masked depression and anxiety. And so that's because we tend to suppress those feelings, obviously, and just soldier on as we learn to do in our training. And our, that's one of the things that gets you through medical school is grit and just pushing on. And so you kind of do learn that as a habit. So, but you can't stop taking care of people. People don't stop getting sick. So you continue to move on, and that can be manifested as depression and anxiety and things like that. I don't think it doesn't really manifest as I've seen, at least, and what I've seen from my colleagues and just the culture as PTSD per se, but I think depression and anxiety for sure.
Hmm. All right, how do people cope? In healthy ways? I mean,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah, I mean, and you know, one good thing is I think you are seeing more organizations offer support services to people in their jobs, physician burnout, healthcare worker burnout. I feel like you are seeing that addressed more. So, you know, and I think society as a whole, we're placing more of an emphasis on some of those things. So, I think there are resources, you know, available to people.
Yeah, I think organizations are recognizing that a little bit more now. As a culture, medicine, physicians are recognizing it. There's not as much of a just suck it up type of culture in medicine anymore.
wow.
And I think healthcare organizations are recognizing that as well and trying to give resources and support too. I think we're slowly as a culture in general making some progress.
I wonder if time spent has a relationship with burnout, although paradoxical, like the more transactional the relationship between clinician patient, the higher likelihood of a burnout. Because although it might be counterintuitive, you think if you have less of a relationship, it might be easier death, suffering. But maybe, but that, I don't think that's how human beings work psychologically. Like the more of a relationship, this is just speculating, but like could it have a buffer? Like time, if you're not spending enough time with patients, we're talking about patient care. There's got to be the right amount of time spent, and the too little the Goldilocks, right? Too much time spent, too little time spent. That Goldilocks amount of time spent, invested, quality, not just quantity, but quality time spent with patient, could have a psychological pro versus con on the actual clinicians. You know, how do you burden the suffering of others? Right? The healer, your flame. You're not an infinite candle.
Hmm.
You need to be relit.
And yeah, I think there's definitely.
Like if you suck the air out of the room, the candle's out.
I don't. I mean, I think there's. I don't think there's a relationship between too little time spent and say those unless you're just. I don't think there's a causal relationship there. I think if you spend too much time and too much energy, there's a possibility if you're not doing self-care as they would say, and making sure you get a break and get outside those fluorescent lights and that kind of thing. I think that can definitely be detrimental. But and that again, as a culture, we're recognizing that more and more. I don't know that being being away more. would be detrimental, other than just the other side effects of maybe not having an income as much, because you're not working, or maybe I could say I love it when I'm around my colleagues. I love being around my colleagues. And so I definitely have joy from seeing them. But and I don't see the correlation, the direct correlation there, unless, I mean, even if it's your purpose. I mean, I could see maybe just saying like I don't have a, I guess you could make that correlation. This is a job and a career that is very, really could be very purpose driven. It is very fulfilling. It's rewarding. Um, and so if you were not to do that and you didn't have that fulfilling part of your life, I feel that could definitely lead to something that, could be seen as depression or something like that. I can see that.
If someone's listening that's in a position of authority at a hospital, what would be your call to action for why they should entertain a conversation with you guys as it relates to helping continually improve their institution? Being that clearly, I think by this point in the conversation, I'm sold on the fact that hospitals matter.
I mean, I think, one of our focuses with Lion Oaks is, like we've talked about, is patient experience. And I think that translates to the experience of the healthcare workers too. Part of our goal is to make those interactions with the healthcare workers and the patients be very positive interactions. And so if you go to work and you're having more positive interactions than negative ones, that does make your job more enjoyable. It makes it less taxing on you. So I think that's kind of a byproduct of what we teach when we're coaching staff members on how to interact with patients. The byproduct of that is the well-being of the staff too. Employee satisfaction, the employee experience, not just the patient experience, because they go together.
Yeah. I would say, and similar to what John was saying, one of the things, I think this is a fundamental uh, or a foundational principle, is if your staff are operating in a situation of, if they're operating in emergency mode, or if they're operating in just survival mode, that I call it, then that's going to definitely trickle down to the patients and to the patient care and the quality of care and everything. So we believe that, taking care of your staff, from everybody, from the dietary staff to the physicians, is something that will not only improve your patient's experience, improve your health outcomes, it'll improve the financial sustainability of the hospital. It improves every single aspect of that organization. And we've seen it. We've worked in hospitals where that has been the case. We've worked in hospitals where the leadership uh, did that specifically, and it showed fiscally, it showed in the reputation in the community, it showed in market share, it showed in retention of patients, it showed in every single category in a positive way. So that's what we believe. That's what we believe in, and we believe it can be done. And then from a tactical standpoint, what do we do that, how do we help them do that? Well, again, we help leadership get there and see what the path looks like to get there. But then we help train the staff on practical techniques to have those meaningful interactions that are easy and enjoyable with minimal effort. And it makes the patient's experience better. It makes the staff's experience better. It makes your whole day better. And it does all those things I mentioned. So that is something we're really excited about because we've been doing it for several years now, and it's very effective and it's fun, and we're excited to teach other people.
If you were to put a theme to this conversation today, how would you how would you articulate that?
Hmm. I don't know.
I don't know a few different topics there. Theme of the conversation. Um, I think the takeaway is for any healthcare organization to be successful. All of the parts have to be working together toward the same objective, and you have to take care of all of those different groups. A hospital is made up of more than just doctors and nurses. It takes so many people to provide good care, and you need to take care of those people that are providing that care.
If you're listening to this episode, I would challenge you to go check out, I think it was episode 223, our first time together, founders of Lion Oaks Healthcare Consulting. Very different conversation today. We almost got all the way down to the, I'm sure there's more departments we could talk about, but we'll save it for next time. Thank you all for listening. Where can our listeners follow you to?
So we are on lionoaks.com. It's Lionoakes. We also have a strong presence on LinkedIn, also under Lion Oaks. So feel free to follow, message. We tend to respond pretty quickly. So we would love to hear from people and uh, get in touch.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Culture Matters podcast. Please leave us a review, and we will see you next time.